politicians, it's not that they don't have skin in the game, it's that they rig the game in their favor and then allow and cream off the top while everyone else is exposed to the risks. I think one symptom of this unfolding political disaster is the revolving door between high office and the corporate world. So I think, was it half of Theresa May's cabinet went from government into industries over which they once had regulatory oversight. And what that means is when in office, politicians have an incentive to favor incumbent businesses, to put in regulations that favor the corporate interest, make it more difficult for new insurgent businesses to get into the market, give the incumbents monopoly power so that they can then benefit from these companies when they earn the big money after leaving office. This has become pervasive in British politics. It's even worse in the United States, where you have the revolving door, but you also have regulatory capture with a vast growth of lobbyists, which swarm around Washington. And I think this is only part, but a very significant part of the explanation for why inequality, economic inequality, has grown in the West, whilst average median wages have tended to stagnate. It's, I think, at the heart of the Trump phenomenon. People are so angry with the system, they're willing to vote for somebody who wants to tear it all down, even if he won't do much actually for the average person. But it's part of the collapsing trust in government in this country too.
And so to try to sort of link these things then, Matthew, because it's a really fascinating consideration to go from that demise, I suppose, of service in politics to the response to the death of Alexei Navalny. Are Western leaders in some way enabling Putin by not taking more risks and by not having a bit more skin in the game in that context?
Well, one of the classic, I mean, to bring it back to Navalny in Russia, and thanks for bringing that back in. I mean, the Tory government was taking money from Russian-linked donors, saying that wouldn't affect their foreign policy. I think this is highly naive, even at an unconscious level. If you know that the funding is coming in from people with a particular point of view, you're more likely to lean in that direction. I don't think it's coincidental that we allowed London to become what was called by Bill Browder the London laundromat, effectively a money recycling operation for the oligarchs who were stealing the mineral wealth of the Russian people and then sticking it into properties in Knightsbridge and Mayfair. Navalny gave his life to expose that corruption that we implicitly enabled. And unless we are capable of understanding the structural and psychological factors that hold this edifice of corruption in place, what we really need, Callum, is a change in two things: the rules governing politics to eliminate revolving door corruption. I think it's very easily done, but none of the two big parties are talking about it. None of the parties in America are either. But also a moral correction where there is a change in the norms that govern political life. This is not something which people should go into for self-enrichment, but it should be a vocation where politicians are prepared to resign when things go wrong, conveying to the public that they have skin in the game, that they have an acute personal responsibility for public office.
I noted in the one of the Sunday Times leader columns focusing on the Navalny situation, a description of drowsy Western democracies, which I thought was quite apt, because often, you feel like Western democracies are caught sleeping in these moments of, huge international importance.
Do drowsiness, I think, underestimates the extent to which there is a deep calculation going on about how to rig the system. I believe, Callum, in free markets, open markets. I believe in liberal democratic institutions. But what we have at the moment aren't free markets. We have more rigged markets. We don't have liberal institutions. We have regulatory capture. We need to get back to the wisdom that is embedded in our institutions, but which has been poisoned, toxified by parasitical influences that mirror in a more diluted form what Putin is doing in Russia, what African strongmen do when they siphon off money into Swiss bank accounts. I'm not comparing our corruption. We have a more dilute form, the VIP lanes, the Greensill scandal. It is an extraordinary thing that David Cameron was involved in the Greensill scandal. He still hasn't said how much money he got from that absolute violation of the public interest, and then was then was brought back in to the House of Lords as if nothing had happened as Foreign Secretary. That is a great symptom of what's gone wrong with our political system.
As Western leaders talk the talk on this and say, let's hold Putin accountable, nobody's quite sure what that means in reality.
Well, forgive me for it, but you're right. And the column on moral courage, I think it is an interesting thing that in the ancient times, leaders were supposed to have what the philosopher Nassim Nicholas Taleb calls skin in the game. They were supposed to take personal risks on behalf of the people they served. Henry V rode into battle in front of his troops. Boudicca personified the martial spirit of the Iceni. And it's quite deeply embedded in the American Republic, of course. A number of presidents, I think at least 4, were generals in the army, and many face military service. And you might think, Callum, today, you know, in a modern technocratic society, we don't need politicians to take risks. We're talking about Navalny today, who took a risk not against a foreign enemy, but was willing to put his life on the line on behalf of the Russian people who have been swindled by Putin and the kleptocratic oligarchs. But I do think it embodies a very subtle wisdom. I think that having politicians who show courage is very important. It may be more difficult to make it work in today's kind of society. But I think the fundamental point is, if you're willing to take a risk on behalf of the people you claim to serve, an existential risk, you're the kind of person who isn't going to betray the public interest while in office. You're not going to steal money from the public coffers. You're not going to expose countrymen to risks that you wouldn't be prepared to face yourself. So Socrates made this point too, and a few of the other ancients. But I do think it conveys an important wisdom that we would do well to remember.